Hi, I'm Jeremy. Thanks for joining me. Today I wanted to talk about pollution because we live in clown world where for some reason we put our faith in the dumbest people on the planet and we call them politicians. If you've been watching my videos, in quite a few of my videos, I have this above me, which is just a Word document where we're going to be specific with these topics and get down to what's really going on and possibly some solutions for this stuff. And as I grow and I develop a website, we're actually going to do some of these things. And pollution is a great example of one of these where it's not that difficult to do, but you have to know what you're doing in the first place. One of the things that I do in these is that we will do a definition of what the subject matter is. This one is pollution. And here, I always have this because I copy and paste this in blank form. So at pollution, I have title and then definitions. And then I fill this stuff out as we make these videos. So this one is pollution. And as always, this is not about changing anybody's minds. This is about showing that there's lying going on like mad. Whether if it's intentional or unintentional, I don't care. It's just that the lies are there. If you are a politician and you're talking about climate change, then I'm going to call you out as being a flat out liar because you're talking about it, you're supposed to be an expert in this, and you don't. If it's someone like you and me where, yeah, we're not really involved with that stuff, it's not our job or anything like that, I give a lot more leeway and say it's like, well, chances are you've been informed by the government or media or whatever with a bunch of fake nonsense, a bunch of lies, so you don't know any better. It was unintentional. And this is to leave it open for everyone that I just bring the information so we can talk it over so we can start dealing with this stuff because a lot of this stuff has answers and solutions, at least to some degree, some just a little bit, some quite a bit. And that I want to provide the most accurate, up-to-date information possible, which is what the website will really do really well. So then that way, this nonsense is just going to be over with. Or it's going to be cleared up a lot. I'm not offering perfection. I do not believe in perfection. That is a fantasy utopia myth. Take that and you can shove that nonsense where the sun doesn't shine. I'm talking about making things better, and we can definitely make things better. So, what is the definition of pollution? It's the introduction of contaminants into the natural environment that cause adverse change. So, not just change, but adverse change, bad change. Pollution can take on the form of chemical substances or energy, such as noise, heat, light. Pollutants, the components of pollution, can be either foreign substances, energy, or naturally occurring contaminants. Pollution is often classified as point source or non-point source pollution. I don't know what they mean exactly by that, and I just grabbed this off of the Wikipedia page. Wikipedia is not great by any extent of the imagination. It's even not that good. There's a bunch of problems with it. For example, knowing the history is usually not really good. They'll have something like pollution comes from the root word of this Latin word or whatever. It's like, don't care. Why are you bringing that up? You can have it over here. Whenever you look at these things, pollution should be nothing but a bunch of click links. It's like, all right, well, I want to know about the history of the word pollution, and then you can click on it. Or I want to know about the history of pollution in general. And it should just be a bunch of click links to the whatever it is that you really want, and not this. It should not be this. To say that you can sum up the history of pollution in like 5 sentences, no, that's wrong. It should be pages and pages and stuff. So there's plenty of things that's wrong with Wikipedia, but it's what we have to work with as of right now. And I like Jordan Peterson a lot. I'm not saying that he's perfect or he has all the answers, but I trust him that he's giving the best information that he knows. And it's because who can do it all? You know, you're not going to be a brain surgeon, a nuclear engineer, a police officer, a fireman, a carpenter, an electrician. You're not going to be everything. You're not going to be an expert dietitian, a weightlifting coach, know how to sew and do your own clothes, be an IT person, whatever. You're just not. You need to know people. You need to know people who you trust. It's just like with your children and with your parents. They don't know everything. You know, parents don't know everything for their children. But the thing that they have is trust. So that, yeah, I understand my parents are not gods, that they don't know everything, but I do trust them that they are telling me the best that they know. And so that gives you a starting place so that you can build up even more. Anyways, we are going to tear apart this Jordan Peterson video. He's at Cambridge Union. The title of this video, and there's several of these. His videos have been chopped up all over the place. This is just the one that I found. This one is called Professor Jordan Peterson on Climate Change and Climate Policy at the Cambridge Union. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name. They don't have a lot of subscribers, 153 more than me, and 15,000 views. And it's kind of nice in a way, but if you don't understand a better content of all this, it's kind of, you can do more. There's more that can be done. I'll have links in the description below to all of these videos so you can watch them in their entirety. So if you too would like to actually have some change happen instead of just this meaningless talk and corruption that goes on, then give the video a like, a thumbs up. Got Patreon and Subscribe Star. I know you may not like Patreon or YouTube, but it's what I have. It's what helps out me so that we can get this done. And then later, I mean, I will move away from it because it's just nonsense. But anyway.
Drought, flooding, and...
So it starts off with this kid who just asks a ridiculous question. It's just a kid who's just virtue signaling. And I want to say that he's malice with all of this because he's just doing that, but he's young too, and so I kind of want to give him some leeway, but I don't know. You can decide for yourself. That's not what the video is about.
Ocean acidification, unanticipated for 65 million years.
Hold on. I play a lot of this stuff fast. I'm gonna put on normal speed now.
All result from climate change, according to over 700 of your fellow scientists. So I was wondering whether you thought climate change could be an issue that could unite us all on left and right, moving us beyond debates about C16 to...
I don't understand why this kid is asking this stupid question. I do not understand this. Climate change has been an issue for decades. It hasn't brought around any kind of peace or anything like that. If anything, it's divided us up more because it's the political game is what it is, and that's what politicians do like mad. Because if there was any kind of unity, there wouldn't be two sides to all this stuff, and what use would we have for politicians? Because, you know, Republicans and Democrats, they're supposed to kind of be on the opposite sides of all of this stuff.
Discussions at the UN at Katowice next month, where perhaps humanity might finally discover its global map of meaning.
No. Oh, and I love it. He's just so straight and to the point with it. It's just like, no, because it's obvious. It's just blatantly obvious. Oh, it's just so frustrating. And it's like, you know, do you really blame the kid who's at this university where he's just been spoon-fed so much garbage? Can you really blame the kid? And it's because at a certain point, it's like, yes, you blame them. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I don't think that's being charitable either. I think that's pretty accurate. It's like, I'm not going to blame the kid. So, anyways, like I said before, this isn't what it's about. But I would say that, whenever they talk about feeling privileged or whatever, having some kind of privilege, that kid's just the embodiment of it. It's just, yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, the first reason is that I spent a lot of time reading. I worked for a UN committee for 2 years on sustainable economic.
And this is something else that I don't like, is that the problem that we have with the internet is that anybody who has internet access, this is what they do all the time. They speak up about these issues that they know absolutely nothing about, asking the dumbest questions that can possibly be imagined, and then they'll throw them out there to like Jordan Peterson. They'll tweet at him on this, and they're on two different levels. This kid who hasn't graduated from a university, has no experience whatsoever, hasn't probably worked a single day in his life, and his parents and family members and his friends or whatever probably have nothing to do with their jobs with climate change at all. But Jordan Peterson, nope, he's got he has his PhD in clinical psychology. He worked on the UN Council for a couple of years, and he's read all this literature, like from Ewan Lonberg or whatever the guy's name is or whatever. He's got something there. They're not on the same level. So I don't want this nonsense where some random kid in their parents' basement is going to be able to speak on something like this. I don't want to silence them, but they're not the same. Now, I've got an answer to all this crap.
Economic and ecological development, and read a very large amount during that period of time and learned a lot, much of which made me much more optimistic than I had been before I read the relevant literature, which was a real shock to me. But the climate change issue is an absolutely catastrophic, nightmarish mess, and the idea that will unite us that's not going to unite us. I mean, first of all, it's very difficult to separate the science from the politics.
And that's the case with all of this. Where's the science and where's the politics? Here's part of the problem, is that if you want research for your university or your research institution, you have to make your research align with the political views. So if the information that is being produced by your studies or your tests or whatever it is that you're doing, you have to jerry-rig it. Because if it says something like, well, there's only two sexes, but then you have a Democrat who's in office, who's in charge of all that stuff, and they're running their campaign on, there's 70 different genders, then you have to change it up. Because if you don't, then you don't get funding, and then you go out of business, and then you and everyone else doesn't have a job. And that's where the majority of funding for these research institutions come from. And you can find videos all the time of these professors and these researchers talking about this being a problem.
And second, even if the more radical claims are true, we have no idea what to do about it. And so, no. And besides, it's even worse than that. Here's one of the worst things about the whole mess is, so as you project outwards with regards to your climate change projections, which are quite unreliable to begin with, and the unreliability of the measurement magnifies as you move forward in time.
So if 10% of what you're predicting is wrong, it doesn't get better. Because you didn't know how to solve it in the first place, so it doubles. So it goes from 10% to 20, and it keeps going up. And that's what he's talking about. Because we can't even figure... When's it going to rain next at where you live? When's the next rain going to come? How much rain will it be? How long will it last? How many times is it going to do it this year? How many times is it going to rain there? And for how much? It's like, man, farmers would love to know that information. And they try all the time to try to figure that stuff out. I mean, back in the day, they used to fire fireworks up there with special chemicals because it's like, well, this is going to make it rain. It's like, no. But they've always been desperate to be able to do that. Because whenever you're a farmer, you don't want to have droughts. And you also don't want to have really long rains either that just floods everything out. So if we can't even do something like that we've been trying to do for eons, it's like, well, how are you going to figure out what's going on with pollution? Because whenever there's something like a rain that knocks out all the pollution out of the sky because the rain catches it. So that's going to have an effect on pollution. So how are you going to do this? And this is just something that I can think of on my own. I'm not a professional by any stretch of the imagination. I can't imagine what kind of things that they're having to deal with.
Obviously, because the errors accumulate. And so if you go out 50 years, the error bars around the projections are already so wide that we won't be able to measure the positive or negative effects of anything we do right now. So how?
Yeah, so it's so bad that if we do something now, we don't know, well, did it work or was it a complete failure? Because the level of errors that are just at the baseline of all this stuff, we can't separate it out.
How in the world are you going to solve a problem when you can't even measure the consequence of your actions? Like, how is that even possible? And besides that, well, what's the solution? What are we going to do? Switch to wind and solar? Well, good luck with that. Just try it, see what happens. We can't store the power. Germany tried it. They produced more carbon dioxide than they did when they started because they had to turn on their coal-fired plants again.
The reason why they produced more carbon was because it's just like a car. Whenever you start your car for the first time, it takes a lot of gas to be able to ignite the engine. That's why people do not go and they drive up, and if they're having to wait there for a while, you don't turn your car off. If they're turning their cars off, it's because they have some other kind of problem, such as their engine's overheating too much. And so they'll turn off their car to let it cool down, especially whenever it's extremely hot out. And I don't even know if that really works, but I do know with fuel that it's the same thing with stop and go traffic. Your mileage that you have on your vehicle is much worse in the city than it is whenever you're on the highway. And if you want to make it even worse, just crank that engine on and off as you drive all over the place. That'll make it even worse.
That wasn't a very good plan. Well, we don't want...
And so it's the same thing with the coal-fired plants, is that, you fire them up and you get them going, and it takes a lot of energy to just get it going. And then it kind of levels down, but and then they turn it off, and then they have to do that big startup again, and then it comes back down and it levels, and then they kill it. And so that's how they produce more carbon emissions by doing this turn on, turn off garbage.
Nuclear. It's like, okay, what happens at night? The sun goes down. Well, isn't that something we should have taken into account? We got to flip on the coal-fired plants. So it was a complete catastrophe, and all that happened with...
See, the problem too is that it's not like this stuff has stayed stagnant, that they've gotten better with all of this stuff. So there was I forgot where, I don't remember if it was in Texas City or there in the Soviet Union, where with one of these nuclear explosions that they had from a nuclear plant, or where they had a meltdown, one of the problems was that you have all these gauges, and they have the little meters there to show, well, it should be at 5,000 or 500, but each one was different. Let me see if I can't find a picture to help better demonstrate. Okay, so this will work right here. And so over here you see a bunch of these round little gauges, and they're all for different things. And like over here, back there in the back, they've got like 6 here, and then they've got like 6 there, and 6 and 6. And they had them all pointed in different directions, so it was really hard. So it's like, all right, well, this one is measuring this, and this one's measuring something else, and this one's something else, and this one's it needs to be between 8 and 10. This one needs to be between 6,000 and 5,000, because this one's doing temperature, and this one's something else, and they were all different. So you had to know what each single individual gauge was doing. And after this little meltdown that they had, whenever they came back to redesign it, they said, well, why don't we just have all the arrows pointing the same way, so we can just have them all point to the left or to the right. And so then that way, if the gauge, if it goes up or down, then we know that something's wrong. And then that way you don't have to know every single gauge. It's like, oh, no, that one's up whenever it's supposed to be in a straight line. They're all supposed to be. That's ergonomics, is what that is. And what was that? That was innovation. That was thinking of a new way to do something. Something that was already there, but we're just improving what was already there to prevent something like that. Great! That's wonderful. And they've still been doing it. This is not what it looks like today. Today, we have it where, and I actually had to put in old so I could find this. What do they have today? Today, they're going to have something more like this. They're going to have flat screen monitors all over the place and keyboards, and it's just, the gauges are gone, and it's software and computers that they're going to alert you to all the problems that are going on. So you don't even have to watch it as much because it's the computers that are watching it for you.
With the price of electricity shot up, there's like zero utility. That's not a solution. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we should cut back. We can't consume as much as we are all consuming. It's like, well, maybe.
Okay, so no, not maybe. Because the way that you solve problems is not by running away from them. The way that you solve problems is specifically looking at what the hell that is that's going on and what can you do new that will make things better. You don't run away from it. That's dumb.
Except the data that I've read indicate that if you can get the GDP of people up to about $5,000 a year, then they start caring about the environment, and the environment cleans up. So you.
All right, so here we go. Now we're going to start getting into it. So here is a video called "Innovative Young Kenyan Scientist is Turning Nairobi's Mountain of Plastic Waste into Paving Bricks." Oh, this is great! And this is from CBS This Morning, so we're going to listen to them and what it is that they're talking about.
Yeah. Contains plastic waste twice the I like that. In the Pacific Ocean. Contains plastic waste twice the size of Texas. That's big.
All right, so this is something that's been going on for a long time that I know about. The currents take all this trash and they push them, and then right here in these areas is where the current just kind of circulates. And so it circles and circles, gathering all this trash from other parts of the ocean all around the world. And then they end up here, and then you get these large areas of trash that's the size of Texas.
Big. Kenya is one of the many countries contributing to the pollution. Hundreds of tons of plastic waste are created every day in the capital, Nairobi, alone. That's where Deborah Pata met one young woman who's finding innovative ways to...
Yes, innovating ways. Not saying that we're not going to use plastic, but let's figure out how we can actually deal with it so then that way we can have the best of both worlds. The answer isn't get rid of plastic. The answer is let's do something with it. Well, what can we do?
To tackle the problem.
This is Dandora, about 30 acres of waste. That's the equivalent of 22 football fields. Despite a pioneering plastic ban.
Anyways, we don't need to hear all this stupid nonsense. So what's going on is that the U.S. has kind of a trade agreement, or the U.S. is able to take our plastic waste and for some reason we ship it all the way over here, and that's part of what they're dealing with, and also that they have their own plastics that they have that's trash, and it's clogging up the rivers, and it's got all these birds all over the place. And then the U.S. and other nations, they also send like food and water bottles there for these people, and so instead of them being self-sufficient, they're relying on others to provide for them. And then this guy here, he thinks that each country should take care of their own waste, and it's like, no, absolutely not. That's a politician who's talking right there. Because the answer is that whenever you're given lemons, you make lemonade out of it. It's like, make something out of it. Don't sit there and cry. And so that's the difference between where he's an activist and a politician versus someone who's an innovator. And so this woman right here, she's making bricks out of it.
7 times stronger.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it doesn't break. Currently, Matia's bricks are only used for pathways in small households, but she wants to target big construction companies next.
That's great. So you've taken this negative and you've made it into a positive. That's fantastic. So again, here's someone. This video is called Have Australian scientists discovered a recycling solution to our plastic problem? And this is from ABC News Australia.
Unlike conventional recycling, the chemical process they've invented means different types of plastic don't need to be separated, allowing plastic waste to be recycled over and over again.
So this is the final product, which is the oil that we're going to use, the building blocks for new plastics.
And this can now be turned back into other plastics.
More pots, tubs and trays for your yogurts and...
Or petrol?
Or petrol.
Right.
Yes.
So in case if you don't know, in order to make plastic, it comes from natural gas or oil or a combination of the two, and that's what he's done right there. He's reverse chemically engineered the process of making plastic, turning it back into this. And then you can use this material that he has to either make plastics again or for fuel. Again, the answer is stop drinking from water bottles. Stop buying plastic goods. No, the answer is figure a solution to the problem. I don't want to take steps backwards. It's such stupid, low-resolution thinking, as what Jordan Peterson said. It solves nothing at all. So here we are in India. This video is called Unbelievable, How India's Dying Lakes Are Revived. So this Surapurja is the name of the region. Wetland was also not the way you are seeing it now. A few days ago there was dust flying here. So you can see the difference between then and now. So after the water came back, then the birds came back, and now there's fish, and they did it by planting trees. So, you know, just like what Jordan Peterson was talking about, how there are more trees than there's been for a couple hundred years or however long it's been, because people do this. This is what people are doing. Whenever you need to take people who are poor and just give them, whenever you just start giving them a small amount of money, then they start becoming concerned with their environment. I mean, we're talking about India, where their GDP for their population is really low because their population is huge. It's 1.3 billion people. Over there, what was that other place? Somalia or Kenya. And they're doing this stuff. And it was, you know, they were dumping all this waste in this plastic. And so he comes back and he puts all this stuff in. He talks to the locals around there. It's like, you know what, these villages, and saying to them that this is your lake, this is your water. You can't be doing this stuff. This hurts you. You're not going to be able to grow crops. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have fish. You're going to have a smell that comes from here. And they built this system here where there's kind of like these tanks, and just by having the water go through it, a bunch of sediment drops down in the first one. And then even more drops down into the second one. It just catches all this stuff, so by the time it comes out, it's pretty clean. And then what they do is they've introduced fish into it, that a lot of this stuff that's left over, it's what the fish eat. And so the fish help clean this stuff up. So instead of running from the challenges, they face the challenges. And then we don't get a lot of government support in a lot of these cases. You know why? Because they're not interested in solving these problems. They like them to fester and to become worse. So then that way they have a platform to stand on. So then that way they can go to you and lie to you with this nonsensical nonsense about farting cows and high-speed rails. And maybe the high-speed rails is kind of something, but I mean, that Green New Deal was talking about putting a high-speed rail all the way to Hawaii. It's like, get the hell out of here, man. Man, you're just insane. That's all that you are. And then here we have a video called What is the Blue Revolution? Get fresh. Yeah, that's great. Shut up. I don't know why I'm so upset with these commercials. Back in the day, whenever it was cable television, commercials used to be a few minutes long, a couple minutes, and I can't stand a couple of seconds now. And so here they're talking about how agriculture has gone down because of new technologies and mass production of crops. That there used to be like huge varieties of crops, but now we've gone and like perfected it, is what they've talked about. Let me see. They have an image of corn. And then they talk about waste too here. It's not very long. I thought it was at the beginning. Let me find it. They talk about using different pesticides, which kills a lot of things, and that we used to have all these varieties of corn, for example, and now they've done this, and it's because of economic reasons and not health and nutrition. And you know why? Because the government subsidizes a lot of this stuff too. They give money to certain companies, and that's the way that you create monopolies. And so then that way, it's big companies that they do that bit of corn, but it's the local smaller stuff that produce all these varieties, and this is all healthier. You know, and then you have all of these chemical sprayings, which just kills, yes, it kills pests and all that stuff, but it kills a lot of good things too. And then because they don't do very good with crop rotation, that the nutrients doesn't get put back into it, and they're relying on fertilizers. And so this is where they're digging up fertilizer. One of the components to it, I think it was some kind of nitrate that they were, or phosphorus, and other important chemicals needed. And it's like, yeah, and that's good, that's fine. And then you have all this sludge that comes out, and then they talk about how right here that the energy that is used is really high with agriculture, and employment is going down with them as large businesses take over. 30% of the earth is land, and then the rest of it, 19% of it is barren. And it's like, well, why don't we go and reclaim all this? And we're going to talk about this here in just a second. And then they show agricultural land, how much is being of the habitable land, how much is agricultural and how much is forest. And then fresh water, and then livestock takes up a lot. But this is kind of nonsense. I mean, about how many calories from protein. I know that's wrong, but that's not what we're talking about right now. And we have all this. Whoops. But anyways, we're going to get to it. And now what they have, the title of this video, I don't know if I said, what is the Blue Revolution? And that's where they're going out into the ocean. And they're setting up all these huge fish nets all over the place. And they're growing these fish. And the big four that they're doing right now are carp, salmon, tuna, and tilapia, something like that. And then you can also do crustaceans with shrimp and crayfish, but those go along the bottom, and so you put those in, usually on land in big long beds where the water's only like that high. And then you have oysters and mussels, which they're real cool.
With 100% sedentary lifestyles and eating habits that entirely rely on filter feeding, animals like oysters or mussels can be hung in multi-tiered nets containing several hundred individuals while occupying very little surface area, making them the perfect livestock. The only thing that could be easier to grow than mollusks is the fourth and final major aquacultural crop, plants. Now, while the ocean might be jammed-packed with all sorts of plant life, the scope of
and they talk about seaweed and, I forgot what the other one is. Kelp. And it's just all these fish, and they're safe from predators. And so they're just there because you can see back there whenever we were above the nest, you can see the seagulls flying in trying to get at them, and it's the same thing underneath in the water. One of the problems is that because you have all these large concentrations of fish, well, they're still they use the bathroom like every other animal on the planet, and so it creates a problem, and that's why they're moving these things further and further out, because whenever a problem came up, it wasn't, well, we're going to stop doing it. The answer was, well, how do we fix this problem? It's like, well, put it so far out there where it's not an issue and the currents can just deal with it and flush it around all over the place.
This isn't even to mention the true champions of efficiency, mollusks. Being filter feeders, these shellfish can build up protein on their own just by taking in the microscopic phytoplankton and other organic matter suspended in ocean water, making their food conversion ratio effectively 0 to 1. Meaning not only is there no threat of pollution from shellfish agriculture, but mollusks can literally be grown near sources of pollution as a means of cleaning water and fighting against eutrophication.
I love that. You know what? How about we find real solutions to solving our problems with pollution? So if we're having problems with pollution out there in the ocean and there's a natural way to take care of it, such as from mollusks, that's great. Now we can still have whatever this factory is producing that's got all these pollutions to it, and we can benefit from it because what, you're telling me that there's something out here that will eat some of these pollutants and it will benefit them, making them stronger, and we can also use that too? Are you kidding me? Stop telling me this stupid BS trash about farting cows and the Green New Deal and all this. Lies. It's all it is. Lies. Manipulation. To raise taxes. To never solve the problems. To screw people over so that just a select few can become rich and powerful and wealthy. It's like you can take your life of materialism and just shove it.
The third major advantage of aquaculture is actually an economic factor. Because of the lax environmental regulations that will go on to define...
And he talks about how whenever you don't have to go out and fish all over the place because you know exactly where it's at, and that you have controlled, safe environments for the fishing, it makes it all so much easier. And that we've about fished out the ocean as much as we can. If we go any higher, we're going to start facing problems with extinction of all these fishes that we're doing. But with this, that there's plenty of growth to be able to take care of it. And he talks about how it looks like that we're going to have a world population that's going to end around 10 to 11 billion, because also not only as you increase the amount of money that people have, and let's be clear, Jordan Peterson is talking about raising each income to $5,000 a year, not the national GDP. And I talked about this in another video, is that so what? The GDP of the U.S. goes up or down. You know how that affects me? Very little to none. You know who it really affects? The elites. The really rich and wealthy. I don't give a damn about those people. They can go jump off a bridge.
Oh great, why isn't it already here? What are we waiting for? And this is a good question because, like I said at the start of the video, there's no such thing as a perfect solution. So while we've seen that deep ocean farming mitigates most of the issues associated with aquaculture, it also comes with challenges of its own. For instance, how do you maintain and operate something as work-intensive as a fish farm while it sits thousands of miles out to sea? The obvious answer until recently has been that you simply couldn't. This is why nearly all current
Until recently, you couldn't, but they didn't stop. They faced the challenges.
Aquaculture either exists on land or almost directly next to shore, giving people fast access to their farms as is necessary for all agricultural operations. But as countries like the United States, China, Norway, the Philippines, and more continue to invest in better systems of automation, deep-sea mariculture is taking its first steps towards becoming a reality. The Norwegian company SalMar was the first to launch a deep-sea operation in the form of Ocean Farm 1 just 3 years ago in 2017. Capable of managing 1.5 million fish, this single enterprise serves as a proof of concept, showing the world that mariculture is not only possible, but highly productive. It's no surprise then that China followed with their own farm, Deep Blue No. 1, in 2019, and is now looking to expand further into the Yellow Sea. While a number of ventures have been proposed off the shores of the United States, I don't think it'll shock anyone to hear that there's a number of legal issues standing in the way of mariculture development.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! What a shock! The government is in the way. That they don't have an EPA permit. What the hell do we need an EPA? It's because of trash like this is why we're not living in a much better world than what we should. Because that's all this is. Red tape for a bunch of nonsense. It's like, oh, it wasn't perfect. Okay, well, then don't stop. Keep making things better. You came up with one idea. Well, what's another? Keep going with it. There's no limit to this stuff.
Here. And this touches on what I believe to be the biggest hurdle that mariculture must overcome, which isn't economic or technological, but rather the simple fact that aquaculture is hardly ever included in discussions about sustainable futures. When we talk...
Yes, because the government doesn't care. Because that would put them out of a job if we actually resolve some of these issues.
About strategies to combat climate change and quell the ever-expanding impact humans are having on this planet, we typically only mention energy solutions, renewable energy, solar, wind, heck, even new...
You know why? Because that's what the politicians talk about. It's what the fake news media talks about. Because all this stuff is complicated. How many things really involve climate change and pollution and all this stuff? Well, how many pages could you write about solar panels and how many different types that they are and how effective and their history and their evolution and the materials that they're made out and where you find these materials and the funding and the resources, and the same thing with all of this stuff. Ridiculous. This is something else that they have been talking about, is that whenever you put a road in the middle of nowhere, this prohibits the animals from crossing, and then it degrades the ecosystem over there. And so whenever you put these little crossings for wildlife, then you don't have a problem such as the mountain lions can't get to the other side, and so then the deer run rampant. They grow into these huge numbers, and then they eat up all the vegetation, especially the young saplings that are there, and then the old stuff dies, and then it becomes a barren wasteland. I'm telling you, wherever, if you do not have apex predators in that area, then you should also slaughter all of the big herbivores. Not the little ones. I mean, it's like, yeah, you can have the rabbits because you can have foxes too. It's like, who's afraid of a fox? It's the size of a cat. But, you know, maybe the area, they're afraid of the mountain lions or bears. It's like, all right, well, then you have to kill all the big herbivores like the deer. It happens constantly.
This is the sound of change. It's the sound
Let me
of
get this
passion.
next thing. So let's talk about some other things. So China and India have shocked NASA by turning the Earth more green than before. And I like this guy here, Anton Petrov. He's somewhere from maybe the Ukraine. And he likes talking about space. And so space satellites have noticed this here.
And, well, actually some kind of interesting and somewhat good news coming from locations that we never really hear good news from. We're talking about two countries that are known for pollution. But these two countries, India and China, have really surprised NASA scientists. So let's discuss this in a little bit more detail, and welcome to the man. It isn't really that green anymore. As a matter of fact, Brazil has lost a tremendous amount of its rainforest, and now is a lot more, I guess you can call it brown, than it used to be. And this so-called browning effect is caused by, well, the human activity, of course. We tend to cause the...
And so he just talks about all these things that they notice from space and the temperature of the Earth and all this. And that they're planting trees. They're not dealing with farting cows.
Reforestation activities around the country. As a matter of fact, India currently holds the record for planting something like 50 million trees in a...
So like Jordan Peterson said, there are more trees than we've had in decades. Because this is what's going on. Because whenever you take even poor countries and you give the populace an income, then they start becoming concerned with the place that they're living in. He's not lying about this stuff. It's just that people don't know this because it's just a bunch of fake lying BS.
A single day. And that is mind-blowing. They've literally turned reforestation into a kind of a, well, I guess you could call it a competitive activity with other countries. But I guess what's even more unusual is that China seems to have even more of such activities, at least in the last decade or so.
Yeah, because this is the Great Green Wall. So here's a little video. Can the Great Green Wall stop desertification in China? Now there are problems with what they're doing, though.
Out for focus, and today we're heading to China, where the Gobi Desert grows by about 3,000 kilometers each year. Known locally as the Yellow Dragon, its expansion has led to many people becoming climate refugees. Beijing fight.
Man, these retards, they're not climate refugees. That is not it. No. They're wordplay salad. I tell you what, anytime you're listening to the news with anything, I hope that you start questioning their wordage that they're using. It's like, no, they're not climate refugees. No, screw that. They're climate destroyers, because these people, they just keep wanting to do the same thing over and over and over again. Part of the problem that happens is that they do things like they breed more cattle and sheep, and instead of feeding them, they just let them out there into the wild. And they just eat up everything, and they kill all the apex predators out there. So they just have free range, and they just destroy everything. And that's one of the things that China and India, for example, have done, is that they've said, you can't do that crap anymore. You're going to have to throw those things up into pens, and you're going to have to go buy the feed for them and stop destroying all this land all over the place because you don't want to pay for it. It's like, no, you're going to start paying for it, instead of having all this trash happen.
Fighting desertification with forestation, and in some areas there are positive results. The following is a France 2 and France 24 report.
In the Gobi Desert, it sounds like the dunes are singing.
Get on with your
They're
novelization.
advancing. Only one family remains.
I don't care about your novelization here. Get on with it. Oh my goodness. I tell you what, I just hate that novelization that they do with all this stuff. I don't care about the local stories. I just need the facts. Just save all this little emotional roller coaster ride for your mama, man.
Desertification is the biggest ecological danger China faces. The root cause of the issue is man-made, deforestation. The problem dates back over half a century. In 1958, Mao ordered entire forests be razed to the ground. Logs were needed to keep factories going, and intensive agriculture and urbanization.
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with taking wood from the forest. The problem is that they took it all instead of taking it out by strips. So then if you have strip 1 and strip 3 and you knock out strip 2, 1 and 3 can repopulate the second strip. And you can really help it out even further by actually just taking some time to plant a few trees to help it get along.
Urbanization were widespread. Global warming is also contributing to the problem. In the north of China, the temperatures...
It's not global warming. It's neglect by people who want to talk about... I'm going to keep mentioning farting cows until my face turns blue.
Risen by 2 degrees in the last 50 years, resulting in more than 350,000 climate refugees. Miao Miao Lake is a new town.
Yeah.
Here there's little work, like a buffer zone. It's even gaining on the desert. Ambitious project was launched in 1978. 66 billion trees have been planted so far.
There we go with the trees again. There are more trees on Earth than ever before, and this is something that doesn't need to stop.
In this province, it's been a success. The new forest of shrubs is acting like a buffer zone. It's even gaining on the desert.
Before all of this, there was only desert. It took 15 years to create this oasis.
Can the Yellow Dragon be stopped by the Great Green Wall?
Anyways, and I'll have links in the description down below for all this stuff, so if you want to watch these videos in their entirety, you absolutely can. So here's what they're doing over in India. They bring in these heavy machines, and over in India, they're not just doing shrubs and trees, but they're also putting in like rice paddies and all these plots for vegetation so that they have food for all this stuff. There's problems because it's not like you're just going to ride a bike just like that. You got to have training wheels and all that stuff, and you have to have your balance and walk and crawl before you can get to riding a bike in the first place. And it just shows all this stuff here that they're doing. And all the things that they're building. And so a big thing with it is being able to capture water. And so now here in the desert, you have all of this growth that's going on. I was hoping, I thought they had a before and after shot. Maybe it was in the thumbnail. You know, but it's just nothing. Rocks, sand, dirt. There's no trees. There's no bushes, just sparse little vegetation here and there, and then they go in and they start planting all this stuff, and they collect water, and now they've got stuff and they're trying to spread it all out. You know, they've got these little water collection things, and it's even going on over here in the US. So 50 years ago, this was a Wasteland. He changed everything. Short film showcase from National Geographic. And this is the fried chicken tycoon David Bamberger, and he used his fortune to purchase over 5,000 acres of overgrazed land in the Texas Hill Country, planting grasses to soak in rains and fill in hillside aquifers. So the chicken, it was Church's chicken, is what he was the co-founder of.
There wasn't any grass. There wasn't any water. Nobody wanted it.
Tell you what, I really hate this violin music. It's like, get this out of here. It's just, oh man, just wanting to play with your emotions. Oh, it's like, oh no, take your drama. No, sell it to your mama. I know I already said something similar to that, but it's like, yeah, it's because, no. I don't want to hear about your dog again.
Poverty, to be honest about it.
I don't care about your story of poverty either.
Parent of the nickel.
I don't care. 5 seconds just doesn't go by fast enough.
Out of the university.
Yeah, and so he donated a lot of the land to the wildlife department, which now they are stewards over it.
I took a job as fried chicken, and with Phila, we began a process of restoration that would change it back to be one of the best in habitat right here. By habitat restoration, by with Mother Nature instead of nature, and that's what we're all about. 46 years ago, out of a drop of water, 7 water wells were drilled, 500 foot deep. Not one produced any water. The top 125 foot of these hills looks like this. It's Edward limestone. When the driller drilled all those wells for me, he said, Bamberger, in one place up here on the top, my bit dropped 40 foot. He said, you got a cavern under there. It's like an auditorium.
Water is always such a key thing. And the area doesn't have to have rainfall. Just someplace around it. Or it just needs like a really heavy rain season. This is something that happens a lot over there in India, is that they don't receive hardly any rain except for like a few weeks, and it's just like a monsoon. It's just insane. And they're like, well, all we have to do then is just keep the water here instead of letting it flow off. And so they build all of these. Not only are they restoring the ponds and the lakes that apparently the British did whenever they were in control over India, they're now restoring those, and they're making new ones. And now they have all this vegetation that's coming back.
The only thing about it was, 46 years ago, it had no water in it. It was dry. It was dry because the water that was coming in was running off as opposed to sinking in.
So what he does is that they got rid of some of these trees that they're like weeds, but they're trees. And they got rid of all that stuff, and they planted in grasses and bushes, so it tore up the soil that allowed the water to go down inside of it. And then it got full, and it started to flow over. And now they have got like 11 streams and like 5 or 6 ponds. And because there's all this water, all the animal life has come back. And, you know, the insects and the birds and everything else associated with all this stuff.
Where it comes from. It was stored in the earth, and all because of one thing, just one. And I'm telling you, I'm going to show you the greatest conservation tool ever made, and everything I talk about could not have happened without grass.
And that's absolutely wrong. Well, not completely. It's one step of many. It's that now, because this is all old. This is from 2017 whenever this video was done. And this was done, you know, he had to build himself up first with all of this stuff, and it was several years before they even knew about this. It's like, look, he's done all this stuff after he made all this happen. Then he donated all this stuff, and then people noticed it, and then finally National Geographic noticed it. And so now, today, we know a few other things. And that whenever you have a forest, there are 4 different layers of the forest. We have the emergent layer, which is these layers of trees that emerge above the canopy. Then you have the canopy layer, which are all these trees that they go up and then they go out. And then under that, you have the understory, which has still trees. And you can see up at the emergent layer that there's really not a lot of them. They're real thin, because to be able to grow that high, it's kind of the 1%. And if you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about the 1%, that's something that happens with everything. It happens with trees in the forest, with stars, that 1% of the stars in the sky have 1% mass. It's 1% of basketball players that are really good. It's stories that are, you know, Stephen King is one of the novelists who writes, he's the 1%. He's 1% of the authors, and he's got like 99% of his stuff is out there, and everyone else is, anyways. And then you have the undergrowth. And the undergrowth, yeah, it's grasses, but it's also a bunch of little bushes and shrubs and a bunch of little plants that are there. And so we know all this now. So it's not just his grass. If he really wanted to do it right, if he really wanted to take it to like it should, this is what you get. And then whenever you do all that stuff, then something else happens. All right, I can't find it. It was years ago whenever I saw this, but it was, go guess, a documentary kind of thing. And they were talking about forests in Argentina that they don't have in this area that they were talking about. They don't have a lot of rainfall, but they had all this vegetation, and it's because they had fog. Because what happens is that even though they didn't have a lot of rainfall, they did still have rivers and streams. And all the plant life, it acts like what we were just seeing with the canopy and the emergent layer. It all acts like umbrellas, and it keeps all that stuff in. And plus, the leaves themselves also release a little bit of moisture. So do we. You know, we have sweat, for example, and so do all these plants. They sweat too. They take the moisture up from the roots, and they sweat it off, and it kind of does the circle of life kind of thing with moisture. They suck it out of the ground, it comes out of the leaves, it falls back down. And that's how you get fog in a lot of this stuff. And so even in these areas where it's all desert or whatever, if you complete all of this stuff and you have several different layers, that fog will produce and water will stay there. And that's what used to happen all the time. All this stuff with the deserts, it's because we've done this. One of the things that my site's going to do is that we're going to skip all this stuff with dealing with politicians and all this, and at some point in time I would love to see just direct funding into areas where this can happen. You know, they talk about water shortages and there's not enough water to be able to water your lawns and all this stuff, and the answer is not we'll use less water. The answer is, well, how do we create more? What do we do? And this is what happens. This is something that this guy was talking about here, that guy that did the chicken restaurant, Church's Chicken or whatever. That was something he was talking about. He was complaining about politicians too.
When I leave this role was to Walden Pond, care of it and to share it. It means to stop, to pause. So that's all then. Had no trees to pause.
There's a longer documentary that he has that's about an hour long, and he complains about politicians too, that instead of looking at the real problem and doing changes so that we can have a surplus of whatever, so a surplus of water. So I forgot what city this is close to, but this was something that they were always kind of campaigning about, was that, well, depending on your house number, you know, if you're odd or even, depends on which day of the month that you can water your yard or not. So that's something I've definitely heard for years now. I don't know if you have from where it is that you're from, but it's like, yeah, it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. There are solutions to this stuff, but what it requires is innovation and new thinking, and sometimes it does require looking back at the past as to how it was before. And whenever you look at these, there's plenty of videos too where people have done this reconstruction of the forest on small scales, large scales, all around the world, from anything from their backyard. There's several videos where these guys just all around the world, from Asian countries to India, to 30 years of their life, they will go out and just like once a day they'll go out and they'll plant like one tree. They'll just have all this. The problem though is that how do you prevent it from happening again? Okay, so you spent 30 years of your life planting all these trees all over the place. Then at some point in time, what's going to prevent some other business company or business person to just going and buying the land, cutting it all down, and making it a barren wasteland again? It happened once, why can't it happen again? Whenever things start going really well, I would like to do that. I would like to do exactly like this guy from Texas, buy some wasteland somewhere, thousands of acres, plant all of these plants. Or I don't believe in giving people money. Money doesn't increase your intelligence or do anything of the sort. It would be something along the lines of doing some kind of fundraising and then using that money to give to someone who has a plan of action. Oh yeah, well, if I had all these acres of land, I would grow these trees and I would say, here's well, I just said it. These little paths, not paths, I would have a strip that I would leave alone, strip 1, and then with strip 2, I would cut it all out, and strip 3 I would leave. And I would take the fallen trees from strip 1 and strip 3, take everything from strip 2, and then have it be repopulated with trees by the seeds from strip 1 and strip 3. And then I would do the same thing. I would take out strip 4, and 3 and 5 would help bring in the trees again to strip 4 and, you know, keep going. Or, you know, maybe they have a different plan. Well, I would like to bring it back in as a forest. And I'm not going to have apex predators like lions and tigers and all this stuff, but we're going to leave the deer, but we're going to allow hunters to come. And part of it we're going to have sectioned off for camping and log cabins, and so you can go hiking around and you can enjoy it, and so it'll be kind of like a tourist attraction kind of thing, you know, to be able to get away from it and enjoy the fresh air, the clean water, and not worry about these animals that might be able to come and attack. You know, it'll just be a bunch of herbivores out there. And to keep the population under control, we would do the job of what the lions and tigers and bears would do, and we would let the hunters do it instead. It's like, okay, instead of just giving the money to someone, it would be, well, what's your business plan? And that, you know, it would stay under, they wouldn't be allowed to have it until they've done like 3 years of being able to generate profit and to do what it is that they said. And if they can't do it after like 3 or 5 years or something like that, after some set amount of time, then it's like, all right, well, then you're gone, and we're going to bring somebody else in to do it. Something along those lines. That's really far down the way, but this is a channel where I'm not interested in just talking about all of this stuff. I want solutions. I'm tired of this nonsense. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the politicians. And so if you are too, then give the video a thumbs up, give it a like, share it with people, and subscribe and become a member. I've got Patreon and Subscribestar. You know, do something. I understand. Yeah, you can't go out and plant a forest. Well, then, for someone who's actually wanting to do this stuff without all the middlemen, without all the nonsense, here's something that you can do. So it would help me out a lot. I appreciate any and all support that you can give me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you again later. Thanks. Bye.